Joining me now is Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. Senator Paul, we welcome you as always, sir. So what do you think? I mean, I think if anything, the events of the last couple of days, can we make this as simple as possible? One big bill starting immediately, put it all in there. It's very popular. Strike while the iron is hot. Otherwise, the GOP and all of its wisdom can't walk across the street in a straight line anymore.
Well, there's one simple question we ought to ask before we get started. Do we want government to be bigger or smaller? So what Speaker Johnson proposed was to add $30 billion in farm subsidies. That's making government bigger. That's borrowing more money. Adding $100 billion in disaster money, all borrowed, not paid for. And then continuing to spend money. This is called the continuing resolution, but continuing to spend money at a rate that we're $2 trillion short. So the deficit this year will be $2 trillion. And that's what the rate of spending leads you to. So for conservatives, it's kind of a non-starter to say, oh, you want to continuing spending things at the same rate? And by the way, we're going to add in $130 billion worth of new money not paid for them. So this is the contention. It's a real contention, though. And I was proud of conservatives who stood up in the House and said, we're not going to give a blank check to anyone, Republican or Democrat president, to just say we're not going to address the debt ceiling. We're going to forget about it. We're actually, going to pretend like there is no debt ceiling and we don't have to worry about the debt and no one's responsible. They voted against that. And so that was a real good pushback by conservatives. And I'm one of those who says you can't just ignore the debt and not make anybody vote on it. The people who vote for big government have a day of shame and a day of responsibility. And that's the day they vote to raise the debt ceiling.
Well, look, I don't think the debt ceiling has much to do with the debt. But I will acknowledge, and I'm going to ask you this directly. So, yes, where are the pay-fors? Where are they? Even in the old McCarthy deal, they were pay-fors. Those pay-fors have been waived. Nobody's talking about pay-fors for this deal, for the $130 billion extra money that you're talking about. I agree with you, Senator. I've asked this question every night this week. Where are the pay-fors in this bill? That's more important than the debt ceiling.
And you have to realize that the people who are wanting money for North Carolina are many of the same people who have been voting to send your money to Ukraine. So if you're suffering in Asheville and you're flooded out and the roads are flooded out and you're living in a tent, you need to ask yourself, why are your representatives sending the money to Ukraine instead of to Asheville? But I'm not for just sending it to Asheville and borrowing it. We should take it from somewhere else. There's a lot of Green New Deal subsidies that are out there that haven't been spent yet. They go to big corporations. They're not going for some emergency. They're going to cronies of the Democrats who own corporations, solar panel companies, what have you, and they're getting subsidies. That should all be ended. All of the expenditures that the Democrats have been piling on, many of them are still there. There's still some COVID money we could claw back. And then there's a question. Most estimates for North Carolina have been at $50 billion. Why are we doing $110 billion? I mean, maybe we could do $50 billion and ask again in a month or two whether it's being wisely spent or whether people are stealing the money from us. And so just larding out the money without doing any kind of conscious pay-fors is a mistake.
So I agree with that. There's no regular order. There's no pay-fors. There doesn't seem to be any concern about spending. I agree with all that stuff. Which leaves us where? You want Elon Musk to be the new Speaker of the House? Is that a vote of no confidence against Speaker Johnson? I mean, you think Elon Musk could do any better?
I'm afraid it would be a step down from making rockets in Tesla. I'm a big admirer of SpaceX and Tesla, but I think it would probably be a step down. I'm glad he's being vocal, though, because, frankly, we need entrepreneurs. One of the things when Elon Musk looks at his rockets, somebody's name is attached to every part. So if there's a problem on the rocket, he knows your name. You're going to be asked, why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? In government, it's the opposite. When we had an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, we interviewed the Secret Service, no one would say they were in charge. We could not find one person who didn't say, oh, no, she was in charge, or he was in charge, or I was in charge of this, but not that. That's the problem with government is nobody really puts their name on a part. Nobody really holds responsibility for the spending and the debt. And that has to change. And so a lot of things need to change. We need to start having competitive contracts, with Elon has talked about and Vivek has talked about. There's a lot of good things that could happen. But if you contrast that with what's happening this week, over $100 billion unpaid for being added to our debt. You know what? That wasn't all. They passed a Social Security bill. We're in the middle of that. $200 billion. Social Security's in the red right now. The last 3 years, Social Security's been spending more than they're bringing in taxes. We increased the annual debt of Social Security by 50% with this bill, and once again, no pay-fors. Now, I've offered a pay-for, which would increase the age of eligibility by 3 months each year, and ultimately, in about 12 years, you'd have to be 70. And do I do that because I don't like old people? No, I aspire to be an old person someday. I'm doing it so there will be some Social Security left when I get there. But to save Social Security, you have to have some reforms. Instead, I think disreputable Congress just piled on things because it's easy to give people stuff and it's harder to pay for them.
And tons of Republicans voted for that bill. By the way, it wasn't just Social Security bill. This was a Social Security bill to add $200 billion to state and local workers, state and local public workers. All right? And we did this 40 years ago. I was there, Senator, with Reagan. 40 years ago, expressly, we took them out of the system. They don't pay Social Security taxes, payroll taxes, right? And they don't get benefits because it's richly benefited from their states and localities. In fact, their total benefit and retirement packages are far in excess of private sector, comparable private sector jobs. Now, for some reason, and I don't know where this came from, all of a sudden, the Senate, in its wisdom, wants to give that group $200 billion. For what reason, sir? For what reason? This is probably teachers union ginned up through Chuck Schumer and the Democratic Party. But there's like the majority of the Republican caucus in the Senate has actually voted in favor of this and for cloture. I mean, this is a terrible idea. And you were right on this, which comes back to my other point, Rand. Listen to me. You have to simplify everything. That's why I think this idea of multiple reconciliation packages is crazy. You can't even get this little stuff done. Now you want to have multiple reconciliation packages for complex issues? Oh, my God. Oh, my gosh.
Well, the reconciliation is, where we can vote by simple majority. Republicans alone, we don't require Democrats. And if we want to either cut spending or cut taxes or cut regulations, only Republicans will vote for this. This is just a fact. We know this.
In the House? In the House? In the House?
Well, in the House, it'll probably be only Republicans that will vote. Like in 2017, when we cut taxes, only Republicans voted to cut taxes in the Senate. I think it was the same way in the House.
No, I'm getting that. No, sir. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm making a different point. I'm sorry. No, make a different point.
To keep those tax cuts and to get them through, it's probably going to require Republicans again and reconciliation.
Yes.
What I wouldn't do, and what they're proposing to do, is the first bill is to actually increase spending on military. So the people around here who think the military never gets enough money want to spend in excess of the spending caps. Well, even with the spending caps, we're borrowing $2 trillion. They want to go beyond that and spend more money in the military. That's what they're going to use the first reconciliation. They're going to plow in some border money. But in the end, it's very important whether it's paid for. And I've already put them on notice. I won't vote for it unless we cut way more spending than they're proposing to spend.
Okay, so you and I agree on this spending point. I'm just saying you have a razor-thin majority in the House, the Republicans. So it's going to be very difficult to get a deal on anything. That's why I'm saying simplify all of this. Put it into one bill and then try to work it through. It will be hard enough. Multiple bills means you're going to squander the big Republican victory from Mr. Trump and the Senate and the House. You won't even get to the tax cuts. You won't even put more money in people's wallets. You won't even solve recession fears. You can't play Russian roulette with it, Senator Paul. You just can't.
Right. And I agree with you. But I think what they mistake is they think they need a border spending package immediately to succeed. And what I think is that Donald Trump, through executive order and through reversing Biden's executive orders, on day one is going to set in motion a dramatic change. I believe that he has the power on day one to say that anyone coming across illegally is not at all eligible for asylum. If he does that, people will be deposited right back and they will remain in Mexico. He has the power. He did some of it last time. I think he can go even farther than he went last time because I think the law permits him. But they don't need reconciliation. We need reconciliation for something bigger, which is making the tax cuts permanent.
Yes, there you go. I think you're right about the executive orders, by the way. They may need some. They need some money, odds and ends, but they don't need a whole entire reconciliation bill for it. And you look, the pay-go stuff, you're right. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Anyway, thank you for visiting with us. Happy Christmas, happy Merry Christmas season's greetings, Senator Paul. Thank you, sir.
Same to you.
All right.